I have just read a book. I have just read a revealing, eyes-opening book that galvanized people's opinion in such a way about the issue of slavery that, personally speaking, no other argument by the time would have done it in such a tremendous way. This book opened my eyes. It was published in 1852. And it was such the impact it provoked in people's mind that it became a bestseller of the time. Harriet Beecher Stowe, this is the author of this book, daughter of a minister, a Christian minister. So we could say devoted Christian with strong Christian roots and background, but as well as that, she was well educated in theology and the academia. But what it touched me the most was that she had abolitionist ideas. That was what really touched me from the book. That was what really touched me from her, from the writer. The book that I am talking about is Uncle Tom's Cabin. And to my surprise, I took part in it. My name is Arthur Shelby. I have a estate, or I used to have a estate in the state of Kentucky, a farm, a family, a wife and a son, George and Mrs. Shelby. With shame in my heart today, I say that I was also a slave master, slave owner. And in truth, Uncle Tom's Cabin is named after my most faithful, fruitful, and loyal slave, Tom. Uncle Tom. He was kind, he bare fruits, and I was his master. I taught him about the scriptures. I thought that I was enlightening him to know more God, to know what I thought it was the truth. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being benevolent. Like, I thought that in the South, no other master compared to me, because I was teaching them about God. But what these people really needed was freedom. And not just freedom by words, but freedom in itself. Freedom for their lives. And I didn't dare to give them that. I didn't dare to take a stand and say no to this, that slavery was wrong. I simply thought that slavery was like Plato the Republic, simply just different levels in society. We have the thinkers, we have the farmers, we need the merchants, and we needed the slaves. And I thought society was like that. Am I to be blamed for that? I guess I am. I thought that as the first settlers, God had blessed me in such a way with good fortune, with riches, and with slaves. I thought that just like the settlers thought, I was doing the right thing. I'm being blessed for that cause. Doing God's will and loving Him. I thought that was me. Tom, he was benevolent, he was fruitful, he was kind, but at the same time, he went from sorrow to despair every day of his life. But you won't believe it. Every time I look at his eyes, I saw hope, I saw joy, I saw happiness, and moreover, I saw forgiveness towards me, towards the South, towards this country. I still remember when Tom learned that I was going to sell him to save my state, to save my farm. Eliza, another slave that I used to have, learned the news and ran to Tom to tell him that he was going to be sold. Guess what? He remained calm as himself and remained loyal to this deal. On the contrary, we have Eliza, who took her child away, Harry, who was also going to be sold, and ran to the north. There they lived ever after, in freedom and in peace. And by the time I didn't understand how they didn't remain loyal to me, to their master, as Tom did. But if my very own son, George Shelby, was going to be taken away from me to a totally strange man, I would have probably done the same. Slavery was wrong, slavery is wrong, and slavery will be wrong. I used to teach Tom about God. I used to preach to him every day. I still remember those days in which we gathered in his cabin. He was eager every time I opened the Bible. And he told me, "Master, tell me more about it." What does that make me? I think I know the word. I'm a hypocrite. I was teaching them about the love of God, about freeing the soul. But at the same time, I was keeping slaves for myself. My son George was, or did something after I died, did something that I never dared to do. He freed all the slaves from my estate. But I was afraid. I was scared of losing my wife, losing my child, losing my good fortune, my estate, and my riches. The respect people had for me in the South. I was afraid of losing everything that I ever fought for. But at the same time, I was a Christian. Or I thought I was a Christian. He dared to free them, George, my son. He dared to say they are humans, they are women, they are men by right, and not because we say so. They are equals. As a man, Abraham Lincoln, said once that we are all created and born equals. He dared to do what I never dared to do. I was afraid. Imagine, I could have gone to jail if I dared to help them. Think about the Fugitive Acts laws, the Slave Acts of 1850. If I dared to help a slave, what could happen to me? Or think about the North was doing well. They were industrialized. They didn't need slaves anymore. We were agrarian. We were an agricultural-based society. We needed the slaves. We needed the hard workers. Think about that. Does that make me guilty? Am I to be blamed for that? We were agrarian and we needed them. Sadly, I don't know if they needed us. Tom was such a nice and mercy person that he was never overcome by evil, but on the contrary, he overcame evil with good, as Christ supposedly teaches us in the Bible. But on the contrary, me, when I could have done something different for him, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help but selling him to a totally strange man and leave aside his kindness, his loyalty, and his truthfulness towards me. All these years that he worked for me meant nothing for me. But for him, they did mean something. Tom, with this very Bible, I used to teach you about the scriptures, about God, about bearing fruits no matter what. But I'm 100% sure that they will never be compared to everything and to all the things that you ever taught me. I'm sure about it. And as you taught me to be benevolent, to be merciful, to be honest, to bear fruit, to love and care and forgive others as you did, I want to be like you today. As John Newton's son, I was blind, but now I see. And for you, Eliza and Harriet, who lived happy ever after in the north, and you, Tom, who died and buried in my estate in Kentucky after being killed by that horrendous man in New Orleans, I tell you, the old Negro gospel song, free at last, thank God Almighty, you are free at last. And every time I read these words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All I can think of is that God is a great Savior and that I am a great sinner. So Tom, if you ever hear me again, forgive me, for I knew not what I did. Forgive the South, forgive the country of freedom, for they knew not what they did.
Right. Thank you. Powerful performance. There's a concept used in that was used in Britain in the period after probably James I, King James I, and also in the Victorian period, which is basically called the natural chain of order, and this idea of an innate or inborn hierarchical system, right? What do you think this was so ingrained, was so part of the slave owners, if they come from Puritan background? I mean, not all of them, but many of the people who came to this new country, new territory, came fleeing from religious persecution. So essentially they wanted to enjoy religious freedom. But some aspects of the old continent from Europe, from Britain, came with them. So in which way do you think this society developed this chain of order concept?
Well, I think that even though they were fleeing from all the persecution in Britain and in Europe in general to the Protestant church, I think that even though that's the issue there are some things that come along and are internalized in humanity. If you were born in a place where you were taught your whole life, or you saw your whole life certain aspects of a daily life, like persecution, like mistreatment, like maybe slavery, that will come along with you thereafter. And even though you are looking for freedom, that will still be enrooted there and may come up or pop up in the coming generations.
Right. You mentioned concept of agrarian society. Could you develop that idea?
Sure. By the time during the 1850, the North was becoming industrialized by the time. So they were not in need of growing crops anymore or depending on an agricultural-based society. The South, on the contrary, needed hard workers. The South needed, because industrialization apparently arrived later to the South. It arrived first to the North, but then it took many years to expand in the South. So it was, by the time the North was being, or was evolving to an industrial, towards an industrial period, industrial revolution, the South kept agrarian. So mainly their economic base was on crops, on growing fruits, trees, vegetables, and that was their economy. And because of that, they were like in need of having hard workers such as slaves.
Right. Thank you.
Teacher, may I mention something else?
Absolutely.
Sometimes I reflect on that the North was industrialized and the South was not. And I envision sometimes and compare regions in Chile to Santiago. Sometimes you see that people in Santiago react stronger than people in the South to sometimes things like issues that are relevant, like education, because most of them started there in the capital. Probably it could be because it is more industrialized than areas such as the 7th region, in which our economy is mostly based in crops as well, in vineyards.
Right.
So somehow I feel like in regions like this we still live under an agrarian system in which we sometimes have to say follow the master's rule.
Right.
I feel like in Santiago they became independent from that. They fled from that somehow.
Right. I asked you a question last class, if you remember the...
Yeah.
All right.
Why it was so powerful?
This book, if there were other accounts connected with slavery.
Yeah. So I read that it was powerful because, well, first, she was a Christian. The author was a Christian. But at the same time, she became interested in abolitionist ideas. She learned about abolitionist ideas in 1850. The book was published in 1852. So when she learned about it, they say that she became so outraged that she started searching, looking for information on slavery, the Fugitive Slave Acts, to know more about it and start writing about it, because she couldn't believe that was happening. So she combined both her Christianity, her truth, and abolitionist ideas. Something like from Southerners was totally deniable. I mean, you could be perfectly a Christian, like the first master of Arthur Shelby, and be a slave master as well. So the message was powerful because it was pushing them to think beyond and realize that even though you were a Christian, you are doing something wrong. And even though you preach something, slavery is wrong. So she was opening their eyes and their brains to this. In fact, that's why I quoted John Newton's song, I was blind and now I see, because he used to be a slave trader. And in the song he depicts his sorrow, his shame, because he realizes himself as a great sinner, and now that he can see, he asks for forgiveness. I feel like the other Beecher was trying to move Christians towards thinking beyond, that Christianity was not everything if you just keep it to words, but to actions.
Right. And Neil, did her skin color have anything to do with the relevance of his literary work?
The skin color?
Mm-hmm.
Could you expand a little bit on the question?
She was white. She was not, because there were some freed slaves who wrote accounts, who even became a part of the abolitionist movement and even went to Europe to give lectures. But the fact that she was white, did it have any relevance in the popularity of the book itself?
Personally, I didn't find anything regarding the color of her skin, but I found relevant that she was a woman, and that she decided to like push against this fugitive slave acts, which had been just, it was something recent. For example, by the time, because it was not just in the South. For example, the Fugitive Slave Act did not only take place in the South of the United States, but it also took place in the North. The North, in a way of getting on well with the South, because war was coming, they tried to have this partnership. Okay, we will help you, we won't take your slaves away.
Keeping the power balance.
Yeah, so in that way, she became outraged because of that. And I think, personally, from my analysis, that she learned about them, because the dates fit. 1850, the book was published in 1852. So by the time in the North, they were enacted laws, and then being released in 1852, that was a big deal.
Right. Exactly. And in order to keep the balance, the states in the North had to agreed on turning the slaves into the slave hunters who went there to get the bounties.
Yeah, and actually, you didn't even have to show a document that that slave was yours. Just by saying that's my slave, you could have it back, even though he wasn't or she wasn't your slave.
Exactly. You didn't need to show a document or a proof because you were white.
Yeah.
And she, Harry Beecher Stowe, was a white writer. So you see that somehow the skin color gives more credibility to the work, because she was denouncing the social injustice, right?
Yeah.
But it's not anyone denouncing the social injustice, but it's a white woman.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, as you say, most of the other recordings were the slave narratives were mostly done by black people, but sometimes written by whites.
Right.
So yeah.
So in this case, it was like one of them
Yeah.
pointing out to this human misery.
Yeah. Some of the critics that I read from the book, because as it was countrywide read, nationwide read,
Right.
for example, most Southerners pointed to the fact that there were some things that were not like credible. Like, for example, Eliza jumping on blocks, ice blocks in Mississippi River to get to the north. They pointed to those issues instead of pointing to the issue that being a Christian and having a slave was wrong.
Right.
So, yeah, that was with regard to some of the critiques by the time.
Right. Exactly. They focus on details, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation.